there, Julie Hirschberg here, the owner, founder of Re+active. I'm wearing my old school shirt, Re+active Therapy and Wellness, coming to join you today to share what we've been learning and doing all week. I'm really excited to talk to you about a book. And I am a little self-conscious because my face is really swollen today. And earlier this week, I had to have a bunch of pre-cancerous stuff removed from my face, and it has, they told me I'd be out a week, and I said no, and I'm still really swollen and in a lot of pain. So anyway, that's what's happening for me. So I'm like really self-conscious about being on video. So I'm just telling you that. And I'm here anyway because I'm still really excited because I've been reading a lot as usual. And today I really wanted to share what I've been reading about. Hey, Brennan. Hey, Joy. I'm glad you're here today. What I've been reading about functional neurologic disorders, and particularly famous historical people who have had these, and what we're learning from it. And so I have to tell you kind of how I got in the bandwagon for this. So first, my really good friend, colleague, amazing neurologic therapist, Mike Studer, kind of keyed me on to this book. It's called A Leg to Stand On by Oliver Sacks. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a really good read. He's such a gifted writer and sharing about this. So we're going to talk about this today, but really I got kind of reignited with this because there was a recent article that just came out last month, and I'm just pulling it up here so I can share it with you. It's called Proust and His Neurologist, The Challenge of Functional Neurologic Disorders. And this was an article in Brain, the journal Brain, a little editorial, and it basically looked back at the life of Proust and said, you know what? He probably had a functional neurologic disorder. So I thought, wait, tell me a little bit more about this. So I had to read a little bit more. So if you don't know Proust, he's really famous French author. What is the name of the novel? In Search of Lost Time, really famous novel. So he's considered a really influential author from the early 1900s. So he also had a father who was a doctor, and both of his parents died of strokes. And he himself had many, many neurologic symptoms. So he had gastrointestinal issues, insomnia, headache, dizziness, back pain. He had functional gait disorders. He would have episodes of slurred speech, episodes of memory loss, and episodes of weakness. So if this doesn't sound like a functional neurologic disorder to you, I don't know what does, but particularly the episodic nature of it, the variability of it. And he was treated by some of the most famous neurologists around, including Babinski. And they would actually put him through intensive programs for treatment of this, which I just found really, really interesting. You're gonna have to read the article, by the way. It's in the journal Brain, the most recent issue. And again, it's called Proust and His Neurologist, The Challenge of Functional Neurologic Disorders. And it's really, really fascinating historical take on this. So I highly recommend it. So when I saw that article this week, it got me back onto Oliver Sacks. So I read the book a couple of times, and there's also a really great article. By the way, if you're on our newsletter list, I'll send out in our newsletter links to all of the articles, the book, the Proust article, and this particular article by John Stone, which is a review of A Leg to Stand On. So it's called A Leg to Stand On by Oliver Sacks, a unique autobiographical account of functional paralysis. And I highly recommend the article. It's a little review. So if you're not quite ready to read the full book, but it's It's a small one. You can read the article and kind of get the gist of it. But I want to point out some really key important things that we learn about through Oliver Sacks' brilliant writing and his description of what happened and how he feels in the functional neurologic disorder. So if you don't know the story of A Leg to Stand On, it's pretty dramatic. So Oliver Sacks was very active, was hiking in Norway, and he was hiking by himself too. And I'll read a little bit about how this happens, but basically has sustained a very severe leg injury. When he was on the mountain, he stumbled upon a bowl and he fled the bowl and he fell. And this is what he says, quote, "I found myself lying at the bottom of a short, sharp cliff of rock with my left leg twisted grotesquely beneath me and my knee in such pain as I had never, ever known." And he was also terrified and alone in this situation. So very physically and emotionally traumatic, right? And he went through quite the process to get down the mountain, have an unsuccessful surgery, have more surgeries, and then he goes on to describe his process of healing. Now, I just want to pause there because this makes me think a lot about sometimes with a functional neurologic disorder, we try to pin it down to like one event or one thing or one trigger. And if you've heard me talk before about a functional neurologic disorder, it's typically more than one thing and it's an accumulation of things. And so we point out that he has this very severe physical, musculoskeletal and neurologic injury. So he has a nerve damage. He also was alone and thought he was going to die. So he has a near-death experience. He has severe pain as part of his experience. He's feverish. He's shocked. He's toxic. He like literally having toxicity. And being in episodes of delirium as part of this. So we have to think of all of that together because that's significant. So then he goes on to describe, this is where I love it because it's just so beautiful how he talks about it. And this is so much, if you've worked with people with functional neurologic disorders, this is how it would be described. So he's with a physical therapist, of course, and he quote, couldn't think how to contract his quadriceps anymore. I couldn't think how to pull the patella, and I couldn't think how to flex the hip. I had the feeling that something had happened, therefore, to my power of thinking, so he's recognizing that his thinking is part of the problem. He had forgotten how to do this movement. And what he says later is that this was not just a lesion of my muscle, but a lesion of me. He says later too, I knew not my leg. I definitely have heard this before. It was utterly strange, not mine, and unfamiliar. So anybody who's experienced functional weakness, I think you would hear similar things. So he says, I could no longer remember having a leg. I could no longer remember how I walked and climbed. Now here's where it gets really, really beautiful. So remember, we talk a lot about losing some of those automatic pieces in a functional neurologic disorder. And a big part of our therapy is helping a person regain them. And one of the things that he found in therapy is, and it was a significant breakthrough, we see this is what we explore in therapy all the time, is he was listening to Mendelssohn's violin concerto in his head, and suddenly, without thinking, without intending whatever, I found myself walking easily, joyfully with the music. in this self same moment, the leg came back. So when his attention was restored to more normal, meaning less attention on the leg, less trying and effort to move it, when he was attending to something different and more automatic, that automatic movement came out really, really beautifully, how he writes it. So what he found is actually, as he tried less, tried to think about it less, he actually got better. And the more automatic movement came out. So then he goes on, and so I highly recommend, again, the article, which, again, it's from 2012. John Stone, Joe Perthin, and Alan Carson, the amazing group in the UK. It's called A Leg to Stand On. They wrote this in 2012. But I just want to share a little piece of the book too, because I really appreciated the afterword of Oliver Sacks' Leg to Stand On, and some of what he reflected on in trying to understand what happened. So remember, back in this day, they did not have the terminology functional neurologic disorder. They had conversion disorder or psychogenic, and that didn't fully resonate with him. And what he found really is that he described it as this third realm. So, and how it couldn't fit in a classical model. So, he talks about a lot of other great neurologists and theorists, by the way. He talks about Sherrington and Babinski, and he's talking about all of these people. And he, confronting his own experience, he says, and pondering these, he also talked to other patients with functional neurologic disorders. Pondering these, I couldn't make any better sense of these. I saw clearly that such experiences were physiological, so there was a physiological piece, but they couldn't fit in a classical model. So at the time, it was either it was physiological or it was hysterical, meaning it was crazy. You were crazy in the head. And he really thought this fit in a third realm, neither hysterical nor physiological, but somewhere in a whole nother dimension. And I just really thought, it just really resonated with me. We've talked about the potential of a functional neurologic disorder being triggered by a physiological event, by a physical injury, by a concussion even. But we also talk about this interaction of our emotions and other pieces of our nervous system, our limbic system, our autonomic system, and how these interact to bring on the functional neurologic disorder. And I really think that is what he is talking about in this this third realm, so to speak, and making a distinction of mind and body, or hysterical and physiological, actually doesn't really make sense. And that's what I really loved about what he comments on. He also comments on the brain's ability to have plasticity, and for us to take these body image disturbances, which we definitely see in functional neurologic disorders, and remap them. So he points to some of the great work by Michael Merzenich, and he points to those abilities, and he experienced it himself, right? He experienced that what was felt as, by the way, he described his leg. I love this. He described his leg as a cylinder of chalk. So in his brain, he had a very disturbed body image of his leg, and he was able to rehabilitate that and go on to to do really great things. Another really interesting point is that later on, he has another leg injury, but it's in a different context. So remember that this story here is he is alone. He is hiking on a mountaintop and is running away from a bull and severely injures his leg and thinks he's going to die. The second time, and so that's where he develops a functional neurologic disorder. A totally different context and environment than when he injures his leg later, and has full recovery without ever experiencing all of the other disembodiment and disturbed body image that he discussed from the first incident that he had. So I think that's important to know too, and also important to see he had full recovery, and he could actually go on and end up with another injury and not have the same functional neurologic disorder afterwards. And that's something I think that's really important to know, is that people can indeed fully recover. His recovery took a really long time too, but he had a full recovery, and he actually went on and had other triggering experiences that he was able to get through without some of the same symptoms. So I think that's really very promising, but it's important, again, the context. The context is important. This is what we talk a lot about in really fully understanding the story for a person and listening. This is the first step of our process in functional neurologic disorders. So I'm listening and learning from Oliver Sacks and all of our great colleagues. So again, if you're on our newsletter, I'll send out those links to you, to the article on Proust, the article on Oliver Sacks as well. And Laura is asking a question: how long did his recovery take? Really great question, and I'm going to have to look at the exact details. I tend to get a little lost in the story and lose like dates and details. I don't know if anybody else is like me. So I'll get back to you on that, Laura, and I'll look that up in the book because I can't remember exactly, but it did take him a while. And there's a really nice discussion too of him with his physical therapist. So that's what's really nice about this book, is really it's from his perspective as a neurologist, and he's working with a physical therapist, and he's experiencing all these symptoms that he is not familiar with. So it's really, really fascinating. So I'll get back to you on the actual length of his process there. So, because I think that is a really important point too. So thanks for asking that question. So again, if you're on our newsletter, if you're not, it's just reactiveeducation.com/newsletter. You can join our newsletter. I send these out every Friday. So you can grab all of the resources, the videos. I'm going to chat on Friday in our Facebook Live and go into a little more detail on Oliver Sacks' story and really exactly what he did to rehab and recover, as well as more of his reflections. There's so much in that book that I love. So I'm going to share that on Friday in our Facebook Live. And then I want to remind you too, we are hosting a functional movement disorders webinar, a free webinar for healthcare providers, PT, OT, speech, physicians, psychologists. It is on this Saturday, September 18th at 9 a.m., 9 to 10:30. We're going to be really going through the basics and making functional movement disorders simple. We're going to do a 4-step process of assessment through treatment, talk through our pie charts and how we apply them, apply it to a case. We have actually had a bunch of people submit cases. We're full, by the way. So we're not able to take on any more cases, but we have people submit cases. We're going to talk through those and help people problem solve the patients that they're working with functional movement disorders. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be this Saturday. There's a link in our bio, or you can sign up on reactiveeducation.com/FMD webinar. We do this because, in case you didn't know, we are super passionate about functional movement disorders and passionate about healthcare providers really understanding the disorder and being able to make a difference for people who are experiencing functional symptoms. So yay, Maddie, can't wait for Saturday. Me too. So please share this with others. We're really looking to get the word out about functional neurologic disorders. I know we don't learn about it a lot in school. It's a newer diagnosis. I learned it as conversion disorder. I misunderstood it for a long time. And we want to just keep spreading the word. So please share this with others. And thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it so much, and have a really great night. Thank you.